Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for an informative ET Unwired webinar powered by Tata Communications and Microsoft. I am Dimple Bajwa, your host for this session. And today, we are going to focus on the topic Collaboration Series Future Ready Enterprises in the Digital First World. The digital workplace will never be the same again. As the global economies are recovering from the pandemic, evolving beyond is imminent threat. And with that, the move to cloud applications and unified communications is fast becoming a standard for enterprises targeting business continuity, global collaboration, and productivity. Organizations around the world are harnessing the power of the cloud to empower their people to work as effectively and collaboratively as possible. When a business expands, its people need to be brought closer. A cloud based collaboration suite ushers an enterprise into a new world of communication with renewed collaboration and efficiency. This webinar will help you learn how to enable seamless global communication across your enterprise. The key discussion areas for today's forum include improving productivity through seamless and agile collaboration suite, managing a consolidated audio, video, and web conferencing infrastructure under a single framework, and single glass pane infrastructure for monitoring and administration. If you have any questions during this session, please type them into the Ask a Question tab on the bottom right of your screens. We will try to address them towards the end of the session. Without further ado, I would now introduce the panelists. Today we have with us Mr. Karthik Ramasubramanian, Solutions Engineering Lead, South, Tata Communications, and Mr. Sanjay Iyer, Director, Technology Solutions, Microsoft India. Now I would request Mr. Iyer to take it from here. Over to you, Mr. Iyer.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sanjay Iyer. I want to start by a fact that we are all experiencing, which is currently there is a dramatic change in both work and life. The pandemic has really accelerated and changed trends across every industry. So I'm here to share today uh, as to how Microsoft Teams is uniquely positioned to enable this transformation and help with these rapidly changing realities. So, uh, so let's begin by what makes Teams really unique. Okay, so unlike a lot of point solutions that are available for communications or collaboration, we believe our approach to teamwork provides a more holistic solutions for everyone. Okay, so Microsoft Teams essentially is designed to help people stay connected, collaborate seamlessly, and simplify work all in a secure and a compliant way. Everything at one place. So in short, Teams is where people come together to get work done. So we'll go into some depth into some of these key pillars, and we'll try and learn a little more. So in the current environment, as we are balancing work and life, through the lens of a video call, there are various researches that show that while people are feeling more empathetic towards their colleagues, because they have a better view of their life at home and elsewhere. So nearly what also has happened is about 60% of the people that we surveyed, they felt that they are less connected to their colleagues since moving to remote work or hybrid work. With the sheer volume of online meetings that's there today, there is a huge opportunity for noise to arise, whether it comes from forms of unpreparedness or distractions or attendees not feeling really included in a meeting, or there is a lack of follow through post the meeting. So meetings can actually be counterproductive. And people typically struggle with paying attention due to a lot of these digital distractions like various notifications, multitasking that people end up doing. And to add to it, you would see suboptimal sound or video quality that further makes people feel more disengaged. So one of the things that we've been extensively working on is to analyze the spectrum of communication needs, and within each of these spectrums, think about rather each of these meeting types. Think about how what kind of support is required to ensure that engagement really happens. Now, here there are a couple of slivers. Number one is, how do you actually make the UI more interesting and get to a stage where you are able to better connect by having various kinds of layouts, by having better ways to engage with your audience. So that is one way, one set of innovations that happen. At the same time, from a work standpoint, you would absolutely see that there is a flow of work. So work happens beyond meetings. So there is work that's happening before a meeting, during a meeting, and after the meeting. And in that entire life cycle of work, there are various tools and solutions that are at play. So, in order to drive engagement throughout, Teams is able to bring through the things that people would require prior to the meeting, wherein there could be various files or tasks that they would be executing in preparation to the meeting. And during the meeting, there are a set of conversations or decisions that need to happen. And post the meeting, there would be further follow-ups, action items to be pursued upon. So there is a lot of thought given behind how you engage someone throughout the works cycle, and meeting happens to be a part of that overall work cycle. So we are thinking about engagement more holistically across in such a way that work is able to flow seamlessly through the meetings that we have, right? So that is fundamentally the thought process behind thinking about how do we drive that connectedness in this new normal, right? Uh, Moving on, one of the things that we are very clear, and it's just getting more and more apparent, is a workplace of the future will not be either home or office, right? But it would be a fluid experience across the two. Okay, so as people will traverse physical and remote workplaces, they will need a consistent way to collaborate with each other, whether they are inside the company, outside, or anywhere, right? So when you combine this with the number of teams and the projects that people are concurrently working on, it can get really tough to keep it all organized. And this is again one of the reasons why engagements can drop, or the momentum in some of the initiatives that a company might be trying might be impacted. So here is where you need actually a solution that will help you to get all of these organized while facilitating a common way in which these things can be shared. So one of the fundamental things that needs to happen is while you try and get a lot of these things within a team, you also want to give your team actually a shared workplace where they could come together as a unit and work on the things that really matter for a certain project or for a certain team, and be empowered with various resources that are required in that common space, in that shared space, for the team to really collaborate. So we spoke of two aspects here so far. One is, how do you get the engagement going? Second is, in order to further drive that engagement and ensure that people collaborate towards a common goal, how is Teams enabling a workspace whereby people can have all the things that are common to them, which is aligned towards a common initiative that everyone is pursuing, right? So that is among the core aspects that Teams really focuses on. So as we move forward, the other aspect I wanted to briefly talk about also is that today an average organization is having more than 200 odd work-related apps. Okay, and there is a whole set of apps that employees have to get used to get work done. And here again, you may just ask yourselves as to how many apps would you be using, to go to a single to get some tasks done, and how much time is lost between switching for those apps, or looking at getting yourself more productive around learning an app and executing it, right? So there is also a lot of time spent in searching for data. Okay, And with the with people transitioning to remote and hybrid work, a lot of the processes that were involved, which were physical in nature, also had to be moved to more digitized ways. So what Teams here does is it moves beyond a typical meeting solution, and it is actually designed as a Teams platform. Okay, so when you have a platform in place, you are able to bring in the apps, the various services that you need within the context of Teams itself, so that you could achieve more in every interaction, or a team which is aligned to a certain goal, they get the apps that they need to accomplish it, right? So that's how Teams really facilitates a one-stop place to ensure that your work gets done in a seamless way. Every interaction, you'll be able to drive more impact, right? So that's what essentially this enables when you bring in processes into a communication and a collaboration layer, so that as you have these discussions, you can also take those important decisions on the tool itself, right? So that is a phenomenal development that is offered by Teams. And there is a ton of services available which can directly plug into Teams, and it will make every interaction, every meeting more impactful, right? Similarly, you would also see uh, that we now have a low code, no code platform, which is right built into Teams. So we call it as a power platform, but this is so this is where, even if you are not a developer, you should be able to quickly build business processes in the context of Teams itself, and you should be able to consume them as you go about doing your routine work, which is aligned to a project or an initiative, right? So that's essentially what I also wanted to call out. So the idea here is we in order to summarize this, firstly, we are looking at the connectivity piece, then establishing a common place where everyone comes through, and further amping up this entire environment that we have by bringing in the business processes as well. So this essentially becomes a one-stop solution for a lot of the services that would be required in order to get your work done, right? So with that, I just wanted to move to the next aspect here, which essentially is all of these services had meant that today there are about 145 million daily active users on Teams. This is as on early May. It would have increased by now. And certainly 1,800 plus organizations have more than 10K users, as you see here. Uh, Likewise, you have 200 million plus meeting participants in a single day. These are active participants again, and there is 30 billion plus collaboration minutes that has been logged every day today, right? So as we build further on this, there is phenomenal sets of innovation that has been happening with Teams, and I've just called out some of the key ones, and there is again an amazing set of capabilities and features that are lined up in the time to come. As we look at this, the broad investment areas and partnering areas that we are looking into is how do we enable meetings which would adapt to the needs of your hybrid workplace. That is a key focus area, as well as how do you present confidently whether you're in a meeting or a webinar or large scale events. What kind of tools, AI powered technologies, etc., are available, and Mitesh will be spending some more time on this during his demos. And this is where we rely on really strategic partners like TCL to bring this thing to life, and all of this is done in an absolutely secure and compliant manner, which is super important as as the security, as the cyber threat landscape has really changed, given the remote hybrid work scenarios. Those are the key areas where we are considering investments and partnering. And please do feel free to reach out to us or the TCL team, and we'll look forward to any questions that you might have in the Q&A section. Thank you so much, team.
Yep. Hello, all. Firstly, thank you so much for making time this afternoon. Obviously, we all have, a lot of these webinars and events that we choose to attend. So we really appreciate your time and patience today, especially in the post-lunch session, which is always interesting, right? So I'm sure the big task of holding your attention is certainly not an easy one for us. So thank you, Sanjay. That was really great because again, not to repeated. But the point is that in this, with this current situation in terms of what's happened in the last couple of years, imagining a world without, you know, a tool like Teams is like impossible, right? We talk of engagement scores, we talk of employees and teams and keeping up the morale and motivation levels and all of that. But the key bit is all of that is even a conversation only because of tools like this, right? Because if not for this, it would be extremely hard. That whole spiel about making sure that work flows well around meetings, right? Sometimes we do wonder if there is work outside meetings and when we actually get our real jobs done. But that's unfortunately where we are, right? Because that the amount of interaction is that important, and unless we actually actively do that and actively make an effort with tools such as Teams, it's extremely hard for us to keep up the same levels of productivity. So having said that, right, where do we come in as Tata? What do we really provide, right, on top of Teams to take it out to the market and bring it to customers? So obviously we've been in this in this business for a very long time, right? We've been a carrier of carriers in terms of the wholesale world, right? So in terms of being owning one one global cable system that goes around the world, we're probably among the only ones that does that today with the TGN cable system, the Tata Global Network. In terms of being able to offer full PSTN replacement capability in over 30 countries, including emergency services, we're right there, right at the top of the game. If you look at the top 3 or 4 carriers globally, we are there in terms of that integrated capability. What has happened more recently with location-based routing enabled for Teams as well has been a very big boon in terms of now being able to restrict that bypass, the toll bypass, and make sure that we are able to satisfy all of the regulatory side of things, while also making it really easy to enable that interworking between your internal and the PSTN network side of things. From a reach perspective, we reach about 99.7% of global GDP today in terms of the populations. So that's how widespread we are, as you can see, here. And the idea here is that it's not just the IP POPs, the content delivery network, the MPLS networks, but it's also the addition of the SIP POPs and gateways as well, right? Which is where you get the true benefit of where we actually integrate with the voice side of things, right? So from that perspective, on the voice side of things, we've been a leader for a very long time, right? Our wholesale voice goes back even before the data network does, right? So coming on to the actual, the Microsoft cloud solutions that we play a part in. We've been a very strong partner of Microsoft right when Teams was launched, right? And as Sanjay was, elaborating on where Teams has come today, say in the last couple of years, I think it was mid last year to maybe around the fall of last year when after the pandemic had started. At that point, Teams at one point had become the fastest growing Microsoft app, right? There were more than, I think, it was about 500,000 companies, who were using it at that point. So those are extremely large numbers if you look at it that way in terms of the number of voice minutes that we deal with compared to the number of conversations and the minutes that Sanjay showed in his presentation as well. Similarly, just the sheer number of people participating in these meetings today, being able to rely on them without any forethought planning or any of that nature, right? And the fact that they've also come across now to support the larger groups and the larger requirements, right, from where they were. What have we done to enable that complete Microsoft intelligent communications experience, right? So a part of this is also how we tie that with the network, right? So we are 8 times a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for managed network services, right? So in terms of how we actually integrate again the data network with that in terms of being able to provide SIP circuits into your locations, in terms of enabling direct routing for how you can effectively use Teams, as your office communication means for voice as well, right? So that has now come a long way, right? So direct routing, we were the first partner for Microsoft here as well. And we've come a long way in terms of our capability on that front as well, and we've won several awards, with Microsoft on that front. So the idea though is not just looking at Tata and Microsoft alone, but it's also looking at why is this unified communication collaboration vision so complex, right? Because part of the problem is, as customers, you already have your ecosystems, right? You may have several vendors that are already providing certain pieces of the solution for you, right? There is legacy equipment. There are interoperability issues. There are all of the monitoring and management issues where they may not be issues, but they may be siloed teams that are working on them, right? So from that perspective, when you look at what we bring in together, is basically simplifying a lot of this for you. So the noodle that you see on your screen right now can be simplified very, very effectively when we talk about how we bring in teams and how we then implement that and take it sort of in a direction where it's not just a complete rip and replace type model, but it's looking at what you already have and trying to make sure that we can make that interworking possible very, very seamlessly, right? So whether it's integrating with your data network, whether it's providing SIP circuits on the same MPLS connectivity, whether it's looking at several different locations, where it is a regulated location, being able to provide the on-prem gateways to actually function and connect with the PRI side of things, and where it's non-regulated locations, providing all of that functionality right off the data network and the cloud itself, right? So all of that is something that we look at in conjunction with marrying the voice side of things as well, right? So, and goes without saying, everything that we provide today and do very much has to go hand in hand with the regulatory environment here. So everything that sort of changed from last year when we were looking at what the Indian government also went through, and what we've been able to do, right, in terms of extending, whether it's just sheer calling, whether it's PSTN integrations, whether it's contact center agents extending to work from home scenarios, all of that has been made seamless, right, with what we've done in that space from last year. So on the Microsoft Teams side, essentially we're very much a preferred provider from the Microsoft perspective. We're among the only carriers that support connections for them here, and by connections, what I mean is the concept of actually enabling calling out between the PSTN and Teams platform, right? So for most customers today, in terms of the moves from the older technologies and where they've been through the Microsoft curve itself, whether it's Link and Skype and Teams today, the idea very much is some of them have been more of a closed environment in terms of being able to use it for their intra-office communications, and some of them do actively try to then branch out, right, in terms of being able to have dial out, dial in capability from the PST and make sure employees, vendors, customers, their customers anywhere can join any meeting, right? And with all of the capabilities as you would. So part of that, enabling it from the audio side, from the global voice side, is where we come in with our connections offering, right? So the idea very much is offering, a dial out, which is from the platform out, from calls out, being able to get people in, and also both your toll dial in and your toll free dial in, right? And also with pay per minute options, right? So the idea very much is it's more of a bouquet of services that you're allowed to choose from. And from the voice perspective, it's all around making sure that that experience is unified, right? So there is not a cumbersome experience in terms of that marriage of the voice and Teams here, right? And it's all about doing it from both fixed line and mobile networks as well, right? So all of that is taken care of today. For most of us at home, if you're an active user of Teams like I am, it's a boon, right? There are several things you can get done when you're taking a call on your mobile phone, being as effective on that call itself, but also being able to do several other things, right? So all of that gets enabled very, very well. And sometimes the calling aspect also helps you, to get around, internet networks that are not as strong near you, right? So all of that is also very, very important in terms of having that capability of, getting that voice enabled. Uh, so from connections, these are sort of the different options that we have. It's a complete managed solution that we offer as well. both from a free phone support to being able to sign up for a more sort of structured approach to the support solutions as well. And we work very well in terms of enabling your own support teams, to be able to answer some of that for your users as well, right? So in terms of user enrollment, training, administration, we provide a lot of training upfront for that. We help with adoption as well, like we do with teams in general. And one of the more recent things from the Tatacom side has been something called Global Repeat, which is more in terms of our global platform for offering teams as a more of a managed service along with the monitoring and full management. So the idea here is, as a platform, it is an all-in-one sort of self-service platform, where the robustness is taken care of with the way we've designed it in terms of the interconnections with Microsoft and O365, in terms of an overall automation and orchestration layer on top of what we'd already have, such that it makes it very, very easy for you to go to market, in terms of the time it takes, right? The idea is very little specific, specific skills such as PowerShell knowledge is required for this. We take care of a lot of that for you from the way the platform is built itself and make it a lot, self-service in from that perspective. The regulatory compliance is completely taken care of in that, you don't have to worry about any of the aspects here in terms of how it interoperates, between both the platforms. And the idea very much is, overall, when you look at how it integrates in terms of the network, the hardware, the software, and the telephony side of things, it results in longer term cost savings, right? And the best benefit of it is the dashboard, the single pane of glass that it offers, being able to look at performance, look at connectivity, look at how your users are adopting it, and being able to look at trending as well, right? Such that the true benefit of tools such as these are always in terms of looking at trending and how your organization is adopting to it, has adapted to the changes that have become necessary because of both the situation and the tools, and where you're headed, right? What are the things you need to do, maybe slightly differently in terms of how you're using the platform. So all of this is taken care of in a very, very secure platform with this platform that I'm terming Global Repeat. This is quickly just to run you through sort of what is offered by default and what comes as part of a managed service and a complete Teams lifecycle offering, if you call it that. The ultimately, a lot of this depends on really where a customer is with their own skill set and what they need, right? So some of the customers with very large IT teams who are very familiar with Teams, obviously, and who've spent a lot of time understanding the nuances and knowing where you can really score. For you, some of the initial options with the control panel and limited managed services may be very, very attractive compared to the overall Teams lifecycle management component as well. But for some others that have very limited skill sets, which have smaller teams, and maybe more global teams where having that support on a global basis is not as easy, for them the entire lifecycle support is much more of a fully outsourced approach, so to speak, where things like the carrier management service, which is very, very important from an overall call completion experience, performance management, assurance perspective, right? So that is where that becomes very, very important when we do some of that troubleshooting for you, even with third party providers, right? And the idea is, if that were to be done on your own, that would not be that easy to accomplish. Similarly, in terms of looking at that entire infrastructure, right, we can do that in a much more efficient manner than if you were to do that with your own teams, right? So this again, it's not really something great for this sort of a setup, but the idea very much is we have several different options that we can look at, in terms of direct routing, in terms of connections, in terms of exactly the type of managed services that each of you needs, and then coming up with a solution that's very, very tailored for that, right? And to just wrap it up, the cloud video interop, right, the CVI feature from with Microsoft Teams is extremely important, because today, as you can see, the effectiveness of any meeting depends very much on a very, very healthy interworking between video and audio, right? And that's the whole point, where attention spans are much more when you actually have video involved, right? You've seen how even webinars like these have changed from, say, last year to right now, where the parallel view of the content and the presenter was not something that we were all pushing on and harping on last year. But now we've found that even in a smaller group, having video definitely improves attention spans, right, and makes retention all the more better. We're all visual learners, and that goes not just in terms of saying that it's only the content, but it's also the presenter being able to contribute to that from the auditory side of things as well, right? So the idea very much is that has become very, very important, and with that the quality of the video again becomes very, very important, right? So with CVI, what we offer is again not just a rip and replace and providing all new hardware and services, but the idea very much is looking at a bridging solution to support what you already have from your infrastructure perspective, right? In terms of video endpoints, making those, looking at the compatibility with, having those joint teams conferences, teams meetings, and being able to, make sure that, that is enabled in the best possible manner, right? And the solution will also enable, third party meeting rooms, right? In terms of being SIP based, and, any of your personal video devices, right? So today we know that, it can be all the way, it can be from a mobile phone, into, your large, uh, rooms, if you will, where you have larger equipment that is telepresence capable, so to speak. So all of that, integrating all of that with teams and enabling that with bridges, and doing that in a very, very cost effective manner, is what we look at, right? So each of this is done with 24/7 support, and the idea very much is to look at that, come in, look at your existing infrastructure and design a solution that best suits you, not just today, but going forward as well, right? And from time to time coming back and giving you that sort of consultative advice in terms of looking at which advancements would suit you best, right? And where adoption needs to increase, and looking at things like that is what we do as well, right? So that is mostly it in terms of what I wanted to go through today. Bernard Ricard is a very good example of a very, very international global wines and spirits company where we've had great success in terms of a Microsoft Teams rollout. 10,000 plus employees, presence across all continents, several tens of countries. I don't have a final number in front of me. That's the only reason I didn't mention that. But the idea was they had multiple tools. Their calling and meetings were not integrated together. They were using Teams, but only in pockets. They've been a long-standing Microsoft customer, before they decided to use the benefit of Teams, for calling as well, right? And so they set it up where we actually provided resources to actually set that up for them in terms of both local and global presence, in terms of increasing their adoption levels as well. And we gave them a completely managed service. And today they've been able to look at and realize the savings from that, right? But the main thing is in terms of being able to replace their local contracts with some of the PSTN providers, having a much more integrated, smoother operation and solution, and being able to rely on one party for problem solving has been extremely helpful for them. So that is where we come in, and so again, with a very strong combination of both Microsoft and Tata Communications, we're hoping that those that are considering Teams rollouts for the larger requirements, where it also includes connections out to the PSTN network, direct routing, and also where you're looking at video bridges, we can support you across all of that infrastructure, right? So thank you for the opportunity again, and back over to you, Mitesh.
Thank you. Hey, thanks, Sanjay, and the rest of the speakers. What I'm intend to do now is to show you a small demo, which actually tells you how we enable the TCL connection for Teams within the Teams. So this is my Outlook that I have, and I go back to my meeting, which is where I actually use my Teams meeting. So this is your regular Outlook Teams meeting. I actually click on a Teams meeting, and that loads a TCL connection for Teams connection as well. So I can now join my meeting. So this is my regular Teams meeting that I intend to join. And I have two choices. So one of the choices, I can even join using the video conferencing devices that is using the CVS solution. And the second choice that I have is to join into the meeting via the audio connection. So I can have an option of joining via the toll numbers. We offer at least 5 cities in India, and across the world, we offer it from 400 major cities. You get the local numbers in these cities. You can dial these local numbers, enter the conference ID, and you can join into the meeting. If your organization actually is looking for a toll-free kind of an experience, we do provide a toll-free experience also at an additional cost, but even a toll-free service is also available for you to join into the meeting. Now, this makes the attendees very productive because today they have a choice to join either using the internet or using the video device or even using an audio and join as an audio participant, and the whole meeting can be recorded. The transcription can be preserved. You can also look at some of the situations where you are actually inviting your external participants who does not have a necessary Teams licenses, or they don't have a Teams software loaded on their laptop or on their mobile phone as an app. They can always use these audio connections and join into the meeting using the dial-in facility. It's not just that, even the host who is actually hosting this meeting has an ability to also dial out to our participants, and we offer 44 countries dial outs. So India is also included as part of it. The whole reason why we are offering the dial out as part of the same licenses is because if you need someone to be added into the meeting on an ad hoc basis, you can actually go to the meeting pane and you can actually join into the meeting. Now, how you typically do that is using a very simple way is you actually go to the show participants pane and you click here, you enter the number and you can actually join them. You can invite the participant to join as an audio connection. Okay, so that's the TCL connection for Microsoft Teams. Now, the next feature that I want to actually talk about is Teams webinar. Now, I'm sure everybody knows Teams meeting. So we always used to have Teams meeting, and we also had Teams live event. And I'm sure most of you have gone ahead and used the Teams meeting and the live event. Now, there were a lot of questions, there were a lot of product feedback that actually came to Microsoft saying that we need a Excel size of a meeting. Considering we are currently in that pandemic situation, we need more participants to be accommodated within the meeting. So we heard you, and we now have a new feature called Teams Webinar. And that's something which I just want to actually go ahead and show you. This will get rolled out to most of the commercial tenants by end of this month or early next month. Okay. Now, we also, within the Teams webinar, now this feature is available for all the E5 and for the E3 SKUs. Within the webinar, you can have up to 1,000 participants joining in a two-way interactive meeting. And you can have additional 19,000 participants joining on a view-only mode. So total capacity, 20,000. 1,000 participants can actually do an interactive way of meeting. And 19,000 additional participants, or overflow participants, can actually be in a view-only mode, which is very similar to our Teams live event. Now, within which we also launched many other capabilities, and just want to take a few minutes to explain. So there were a request that came to Microsoft multiple times, and customers have been asking that we need a registration form. So again, we heard that feedback, and we now have a registration form available with your webinar. Now, these registrations, you can actually go ahead and custom upload an image from a branding perspective. You can capture these details. You can enter the event details. You can add the speakers. Okay. So I can actually go ahead and add all the speakers. I can add additional fields. Okay. For example, job title, industry, country, region, and I can capture these feedbacks and then copy the registration link. Okay. So this is the registration feature that we are talking about. You can also dictate people that who needs a registration, whether the registration is required, whether it is required only for the people within the organization, or is it for everyone. So for example, if I actually set it to everyone needs to actually register for this event. If I set it to people within my organization, then it is only for the organization uh, within my tenant. Those people needs to actually go ahead and register. I also have provided additional security functionality, something that Sanjay just spoke about. We can actually say that request response, or we can say that the invitation cannot be forwarded for them. So you can actually restrict those ones. So this is the registration format. This is the presenters. So you will add the presenters once. So let's say I will just show you here. I can create a presentation which says TCL webinar. I can add the required presenters. So I will go ahead and just add Sanjay, right? And I can add optional presenters, and then I can go to the scheduling assistance and I can start adding the optional attendees or the required attendees. Now, this will allow you to have 20,000 participants joining, out of which 1,000 participants in a two-way mode. Not only that, these 1,000 participants can also join using the PSTN conferencing. So you, at the end of, so I can just show you, I'll just set this up for, let's say, 6 o'clock for today. And I just send this to Sanjay just to show you how does it actually looks like. So that's the calendar invite that you see in my calendar. And if I click on this, you will see the PSTN conferencing details as well within the invite. Now, these PSTN conferencing, using these PSTN conferencing, so that's a different logo that you actually see, which actually defines it as a webinar. And if you now go here, you could see here, there is an audio way of joining into this webinar as well. So you can now join the same webinar using the audio connections that TCL has actually integrated with the Microsoft Teams. So we have bridged that gap. We have heard you. We have added these features and we have made it more secure. In fact, just the last thing that I want to actually show you. So within this, within the invite, you also have an option of creating a granular meeting options. And when I actually click on the granular meeting options page, it allows me to set this meeting with certain controls. And these certain controls are configurable based on the user. So I can actually go ahead and say that who can bypass the lobby, okay? Whether it is only people within my organization or even outside. So there are different choices that are available. I can even allow people to join with bypassing the lobby. They don't need to. Whether the callers needs to announce, okay, who can present? Am I allowing people to actually present, or is that control only retained with me? Okay. Second, on the recording side, are you allowing people? Are you allowing mic for attendees? Are you allowing people with a camera? If I remove that, people do not have an access to mics, right? I can even create a automatic recording link. Okay? And I can also create whether the meeting chat is enabled or is it not enabled or is it only available during the meeting itself. So I can set up my own security controls based on the sensitivity classification of this meeting, okay, and make it more secure, more compliant, okay, and have one of the best meeting modern experience. Okay, that's about it. That's the short demo that I wanted to actually talk about the TCL connection for Teams and the Teams webinar feature, which we are basically launching out in next week or so. All right. That's about it from my side. I'm stopping the presentation and giving the control back to Dimple.
Thank you, Mitesh, for taking us through that demo. It was indeed very interesting. And I also thank our panelists, speakers for the wonderful presentations. Thank you, Mr. Rama Subramanian and Mr. Iyer. We will now take up the questions. The participants can post their questions in the Ask a Question tab on the bottom right of your screens. In the meanwhile, I would also request the audience to fill in the feedback form as it is very important to us. You can find the feedback tab on the bottom of your screens. So yes, going forward, our first question, the first question that we received says, do you see organizations adopting a hybrid working structure, or will they adopt remote working? How will the future of work vary? Yes, Mr. Iyer, would you like to go?
Sure. So, uh, of course, the way forward seems to be hybrid work. At this point in time, given the situation in India, we are going through a remote work phase. Uh, so fundamentally, as people come back to their offices, there are, of course, newer preferences that the workforce in general have called out. And so most of the companies are expressing very clearly that not all the employees would go back to office, and there are a lot of these large companies who have made those plans clear. So it's going to be clearly a hybrid way of working as we in the near future. Uh, and to support that, there are a lot of innovations that Microsoft, TCL, a lot of the other partners who are involved in the ecosystem are actually enabling.
Right. Mr. Karthik, would you like to add something to that?
Sure, yeah, and the tools exist, right? It's all about which ones you choose, what's most appropriate for you, and how you're rolling it out, within your own environments. So it's not for a lack of technology, so to speak, but I think today it's the opposite, right? You have too many things that are available. So the idea is to look at, how much of your workforce is coming back, where, what works best for you compared to, anyone else, and then making sure that, you can deploy, the tools
Mm.
accordingly.
Right. We've got another question come in. It says, what are the top three features over competition like WebEx or Zoom, and the difference between Meet and webinar?
Oh,
I
well,
can take that question if you are okay, Sanjay.
yeah. Go ahead, Mitesh. Go ahead.
All right. So we typically avoid to talk about compete, but you have to also understand it's not just the meeting, but it is a before meeting, during the meeting, and post the meeting. It's not just the meeting, but also the integration with the deep integration capability with your line of business apps. It's not just the meeting, but also the overall uh, collaboration that you attach with the meeting. So all these three fronts, if you actually look at it, Teams allows you to have one of the best pre-meeting, during meeting, and a post-meeting experience. Most of your line of business applications, in fact, all can be integrated with the Teams as a platform, and it becomes your one single unified, homogeneous platform just for collaboration, not for collaboration, but even for the communication. So that's what I would actually put it. There was another question on the webinar side. I will refrain myself from doing a feature to feature comparison. So I mean that's not this webinar is actually meant for. The other option that someone asked me is what is the difference between webinar and the regular team event? So the regular team event does not allow two-way interaction because it has a typical presenter, a producer, and a participant roles. While in a webinar, we allow it to be a meeting plus the event kind of a option where the first 1,000 participants who join into the meeting has an option to do a two-way conversation, and the rest additional 19 participants who actually joins will be in the view only mode. So that's about the webinar, which is the latest feature that is getting rolled out. Our meeting participant limit is at 300 participants. Each meeting, we are not capping you at the participant. We are not capping it at a host, nor we are capping anybody at the concurrent level. If we were to compare this against the that competes often. Sanjay, if you want to add anything more.
Yeah, just one more core aspect that I want to call out is the security and compliance piece, and that cuts across the platform. I mean, it's just not circling the teams as a service aspect, but when we talk about work in general, we are talking about various apps, various pieces of data that we might work upon during the course of our work, right? And each of those elements have to be secured, they have to be retained depending on the industry which you are in. There would be various compliances regulations that you have to follow. So there would be retention policies, compliance policies. If you are in a if you are a finance organization, you would have the local India mandates for a bunch of things, right? So each of that is also supported, and it is natively done so. So that is a big differentiator. So when we call out Teams as a platform, it integrates with the broader work ecosystem that you would have, and that too in an extremely secure fashion.
Uh, Thank you for answering that. So we have another question that says, with the employees continuing work from home using personal devices, how can we ensure that our policies and security guidelines are implemented without impacting their personal data? Mr. Subramanian, you would you want to take would you want to take that question?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so there's probably two or three different things, right? One is obviously from a policy perspective, whether BYOD is something that's here to stay, or from an organizational perspective, from a security perspective, that's something you want to move away from is very much, it depends on the organization, right? And how they've functioned so far and what tools they use. From a tools perspective, I mean, there's probably two or three different ways to look at it, right? So one is more in terms of making sure that you understand your traffic and application flows, right, to understand where things reside and where the access is coming from, and to make sure you're then deploying tools to enable policies that way consistently globally, so that, for example, if it's about going out to the internet, um, whatever you deploy as policies within an office, within a perimeter, you're able to deploy and effectively police for the same, regardless of where that user is based from, coming in right now, right? So you have several things like on the proxy side of things that are available today. Some very well known solutions that are available, where deploying a simple agent can do that for you, right, in terms of being able to allow the same type of policies like you would when you're sitting in the office. The other side of that, obviously, in terms of when you have apps sitting behind a data center, whether it's your own premise, your own cloud, public cloud, there are similar tools today available where instead of tunnels being stitched to those locations, the idea is the user does not even know, in a zero trust world, that the apps reside in those locations, right? And so you have outside in tunnels and inside out tunnels, right? Those are two different concepts. The idea is you have a central point in a provider network from where you get these tunnels built to both these points, right, such that either party knows where the other party is or exists. So all of it is based on zero trust going forward. So I mean, there are several different tools, right? It depends very much on what are you trying to really push. When we talk BYOD, whether it's you're only talking laptops for the most part, or if you're also going to look at mobiles, what tools you're going to deploy across the board in terms of collaboration tools, and then looking at security as a wrap on the entire thing, right? So it's not just having a VPN and deploying hardware-based VPN from your on-prem office, and because things are not centralized anymore, right? You don't have a perimeter, you don't have users who are in a network. It's all over the place. So the idea very much is looking at a combination of one or two different things and then managing that accordingly.
Right, right. So our next question is from Vijay Dogra. He wants to know your views on cost of offices, infrastructure, prime locations, near home center, etc.
Near home center, as in, so if that's more of a question of related to the first bit on hybrid functioning going forward, yeah, we hear both sides of this, right? You hear very early on last year, you had a couple of sort of mid to semi large companies in Chennai, where I am, and a couple of other larger metros actually announcing that they were closing down, two offices or three offices where they had four or five in the same city, right? So if they had, a place in the middle of the city where real estate's extremely expensive, and they had like 50 people based there, and today that place has to hold only five folks. Yes, it makes no sense for them to hold on to that, right? So there is one side of that. The other part obviously is when you do have folks going back, for the larger SIs, for the larger companies who already have established very, very large facilities, it makes sense for them because you can still effectively have social distancing, actually in those locations, right? You can have some of those locations established as isolation centers. So it depends on, from an organizational perspective, what you want to do with the direction that you're headed, what tools you have to enable work from home working, and how you're basically implementing that, so to speak. So it's not a, and obviously this changes, right? It's not a decision that's going to stay the same for the next 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. I mean, let's face it, we don't know what's happening in the next 3 months, let alone the next 3 years, right? So it's going to be interesting to see where that goes.
Right.
So I'll maybe add a bit to Karthik, if
Sure.
that's okay.
Sure,
See,
sure.
one of the things that Teams, or rather the full Office 365 suite, enables is very rich telemetry. Okay, so we've seen a lot of our customers utilizing telemetry to plan how hybrid work should be. Okay, so what I mean by that is every time we have a meeting, every time we send out an email, every time we collaborate on a portal, okay, when it is on Office 365, there is a digital exhaust that we generate, which is all captured as telemetry, and there are analytical dashboards that can be built on top of it, which will illustrate which team or which department is collaborating with which functions in your organization, right? So what that enables is for planners to come to a hypothesis that, well, these are the roles, these are the personas who'll have to be in office, or these are the roles that can work from home, and this would be the frequency. So it helps them plan in such a way that work can happen as seamlessly as possible again. So there are a lot of interesting insights that this telemetry generates, and it solves for various kinds of challenges. This was one such for the planning aspect.
All right. So Sita Raman wants to know if linking Teams to Active Directory is working. That.
So Teams is integrated with Active Directory fundamentally. I would actually go back to a question prior where we were talking briefly of how do you differentiate between, or how do you ensure that you are productive and secure. These two are in some ways opposite things, because security would try to block everything, and you really want work to happen, right? So in fact, it is the identity that is the pivot here, and Teams Teams lives on identity, right? So essentially, we use identity to differentiate between what is work and what is personal, because personal, of course, will not have your corporate identity associated with the apps that you use in your personal world, right? So one of the ways to do that is because Teams is very deeply integrated with Active Directory, meaning I'm also calling out Azure Active Directory, because Active Directory largely is what you refer to as the on-premise setup. And your on-premise Active Directory can synchronize with Azure Active Directory, which Teams utilizes. So when you think about it, of course, it is integrated, and it is only through this Active Directory that we are able to differentiate between various kinds of policies that various people would have, the ways in which you are able to identify if someone is available or not. Well, there is a presence protocol that runs there, but then the underlying backbone for that too is the Active Directory. So you'll find Active Directory, living and breathing through Teams.
Uh, Also, can you throw some light on the innovations happening at Microsoft for the Collab suite of services? What can we expect in the future?
Uh, well, in summary, there are a lot of innovations that are actually happening. The most recent ones we announced was in Ignite in spring. This is about 2 to 3 months ago. There is a plethora of announcements across services, but some of the things that really excites me in terms of these announcements are uh, things that cater better to hybrid work. Okay, so there were a series of announcements around well-being. Okay, so as people are adjusting to the remote work, the hybrid work, both of these are there is a transition currently on. So pardon me if I'm using it a little loosely. I understand both of these are very different. But having said that, what happens is there are abilities to understand whether you're how motivated your team is, because you're not physically connected with them, how productive your team is, right? Are you able to disconnect efficiently between your work and are you able to transition seamlessly to your personal life? Because in this age of meetings, it can sometimes get difficult because you're juggling between personal and work all the time, right? So there are some of those capabilities, and then there are leadership views that has been created, which tells you from a culture standpoint how the org is changing. Okay, and what are those change? Who are those change agents, and how do we ensure that people are in good spirits? You get to check in for yourself like you would do in a fitness tracker app, as to today I had so many things, or I walked so many steps. The same way you are able to also log some of the things about your well-being. How are you feeling today, and so on and so forth, so that you can mindfully disconnect and move off. So that is one nice innovation that is coming through, and there is data to support what you are feeling. Okay, it could be a certain meeting is stressing you, or it could be you're spending if you are in sales, you might be spending lesser time externally, more internally, right? So how do you optimize it? How do you look at top performers versus what you are doing, right? And a lot of that insights are being surfaced to ensure that your teams are able to work in the most optimal way in this new environment. So that is one kind. The other kind of innovation that is really exciting is AI applied on different kinds of content. Okay, we've of course seen forms processing, we've seen cognitive capabilities. Okay, we have something called as Project Cortex, and you would see something called as SharePoint syntax, which is one of the outcomes of Project Cortex. So essentially, SharePoint syntax will allow you to put AI on content. Okay, and it will be able to reason over content and simplify, because companies have a ton of content, all could be various types. If you are asked to classify it, or generate things out of it, things that are important for your organization to drive processes. Okay, then that would be a difficult task, right? If you are to do it manually. Now AI is able to reason over those. So those are some of the things. At the same time, we are absolutely excited about the potential that Power Platform has, because a lot of these processes can be simplified, and each of these things actually ties back to the communication and collaboration piece. Simply because for example, if there is a communication that we are having on, let's say, I want a PO to be approved. While we are having a discussion around why this PO should be approved, there is another tool that exists where someone is actually taking steps, right? So if I just brought that tool into the context of this conversation, maybe we could take that step right away in here and have a more impactful conversation, right? So you will have more decisions done through each of these ways that are available now, and a lot of this, of course, are aligned with the remote and hybrid work. So in summary, these are the top 3, 4, but there are many more. I mean, I would have missed a ton of it, honestly.
Yes, so we have one more question. It says, can you share an example of how Tata Communications is enabling voice over cloud and connecting teams to be able to dial in and out to phones? In what scenarios can this be useful to organizations?
Okay, sure. So essentially, the demo that Mitesh went through, right, was pretty much showing how we do that. The difference in terms of What Microsoft has by default versus what we add is more the capability, to spread that geographically as well. So, right, in terms of having phone system and Microsoft's own capabilities, typically it's limited in terms of where they can provide that, right, and in terms of which countries, and in terms of the integration with the infrastructure that you have, and being able to provide that over sort of the same network from a data perspective, and making sure that that ties in, providing gateways, providing the PRI lines, if you will, in a location such as India, and making sure that can work together in one Teams platform is where we come in. So in terms of use cases, so the idea very much is, if you're in any conference, right, the idea is being able to do audio only if you want, right? And if you're not in a location where that's easy enough to access, being able to have that as an alternative. So even today when you're on a call, I know it's not, I know internet access today at home is much better than it was 10 years ago, right? But even today, there are certain days when your power is not on, right? And we all have other means of power as well, but the point of the matter is that there is a time when your modem may not be working, right? And your internet access is off. If there is a call that you need to make, at least without the content, but if you're able to make the voice call, that makes a big difference to your workday, right? So that would be just one instance. But the idea overall here is being able to call someone, say, who's not at their desk or who are not logged in, right? Being able to call someone on their mobile phone as well. That's another very simple use case, so to speak. So the uses are really endless, right? It's no different to having that as an option. And I'm sure once we know that's an option, there will be several different use cases that get made up as well. Sanjay, I'm
In
not
fact,
sure if.
just to add,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
to add, right?
Sure, Mitesh.
Your suppliers, your vendors, partners, the third party, who probably do not have an access to Teams or have not downloaded the Teams on their mobile or on the laptop because of the corporate policy or because of sheer lack of knowledge as well. They can also use these PSTN conferencing and dial into the meeting and can be productive, can contribute back to the meeting. The second other option is you want to dial out from the meeting to a specific number. Now, since we allow this to about 44 countries, you can pull any participants from these 44 countries and get them into the meeting without sending a formal invitation, asking them to join, wasting everyone's time. So that's another use case that you could probably look at. One of the companies actually using this for their learning and development, where they're using this platform so that people can log in and just listen to some of the new product announcements, marketing announcements, and etc. for their vendors, partners, suppliers, etc. Sorry, Sanjay, if you want to add anything more.
No, I think I was getting to the similar set of use cases. I just remembered a few manufacturing companies who are absolutely doing this to have a ongoing communication with their dealers, with their suppliers. So it was a very similar example that I wanted to share. But thanks, Mitesh. I think you got it covered.
We have another question that's coming from Devan Vijayan. He says, in remote work situations, India always faces bandwidth issues. What is the dynamic bandwidth allocation mechanisms with Teams now? I would say it should work even in 2G networks. And if video is not viable, it should fall back to audio mode only.
I'll take that question. So we
Yeah.
have done a considerable amount of improvement on our codec front. We have adopted to new codec. In fact, there is an option now that shows on the Teams that also gives you a rough idea on how much is the bandwidth that you are actually consuming with your video on, with your presentation screen sharing on. And it also tells you what is the condition of your network. Also gives you some of the important parameters such as delay, jitter, buffer, all that sort of stuff. Now, since it's a scalable codec, we detect the network condition. We also detect how much is the overall bandwidth that is available, and then also gives you a visual banner which says that you should turn off your video to improve the quality. So that happens automatically. A user intervention is not required. In fact, user gets prompted saying that please go ahead and turn off your camera because there is a crunch in the bandwidth. So that's happening. In fact, you can have a very good audio call under 2G as well. The audio cord typically takes about 64 kbps with all the overheads included on top of it. That includes your layer 3 and layer 2 overheads. So 64 kbps, if you have that kind of a bandwidth, the audio call will go through. If you still have any crunch and you are in a place where you feel that is also not available, the best thing is to go for an audio connection, connect using the audio, because PSTN audio will be anyways available anywhere you go, right? So as long as you have a regular mobile network, a voice call can be initiated from any place.
Thank you. And with that, we are done with the questions. Before we inch closer towards the end of the session, I would request the speakers to suggest some key takeaways from the session today that they would want the audience to leave with. Mr. Iyer.
Well, I have a few things that I want to leave you with. Number one is, as we plan for remote and hybrid work, think about the full life cycle. A point solution may be good enough to get the work done on a particular day, but when you think about the long term and when you want everything to come together, thinking about that entire life cycle is a core thing. And one of the other things is, in our aspiration to get more and more productivity, we tend to compromise on security. So the balance between security and productivity is super essential, and we spend a lot of time and effort in striking that right balance with teams and the related security aspects. So I would really want us to think about this as a key takeaway. Okay. The third piece is, as we are moving to hybrid work, from a remote work model, okay, you would see a lot of processes getting optimized, and a lot of these processes can benefit if they are brought within the context of your communications and collaboration. Okay. Now, the tool itself, or rather, instead of thinking of communication and collaboration as a tool, I would like to rephrase that and say that it should be ideally a platform, right? Which will allow you to embed all of these business processes within the context of your communication and collaboration, and that's precisely what Teams aims to do. Okay, and that that really simplifies the way in which we are able to make decisions. Okay, and one of the things that is a big call out is the ability to create apps, okay, without having the knowledge of actually development knowledge, or coding knowledge, and is something that is very unique within Teams. Okay, so if you think about a business process, if you want to build a chatbot, if you want to simplify certain workflows, okay, it doesn't need you to be technically very sound. You just it's all a visual way in which you could build some of those, connect to some of your apps, and get things moving, right? So these three to four key points would actually help you transition very well, at the same time be secure and done, right? So those are the 3 4 key takeaways that I would leave for you in this session. And of course, each of these capabilities are very deeply connected with the various offers from Tata Communications that are there.
Yep, thanks, Sanjay. And just to add to that, Dimple, so the idea from us very much is that it's looking at more of a business and an enterprise type solution, right? And having the backing of a Tata and a Microsoft. So the idea here is we're not a partner that is there just for a point solution to come and implement something and go out and not worry about the performance or the impact or the need for an improvement, a change, a replacement, after the life cycle of that service, right? So that is one. The other is in terms of integrating it with the network wrap and the security wrap side of things, right? And being able to ensure that regardless of you, in terms of having a centralized setup or a distributed setup, the way you use O365, how you're going into it. So making sure that through all of that, right, you look at the performance of teams as one item that is in that larger ecosystem as well, right? And the third thing obviously is in terms of your existing investments, right? So the idea is today a lot of companies do have multiple tools as well, but the idea is basically to come in and ensure that we can also help you realize the benefits of making sure that the two or three tools can either interwork with each other. You can enable a bridge that can have multiple OEM technologies on it, or maybe just flat out tell you a year from now, if we were to eliminate two of the other solutions and hone in on this as your main UC piece, right, around which you build others, that may be the decision for you going forward as well, right? So that is where having that sort of a consultative approach jointly, where we can also help you with our experience across this in terms of across industries, right, across different types of customers, across geographies, across regulatory differences between different countries. So all of that experience is what, from the Tata perspective, we bring in into what Teams already is as a stellar platform. So thank you, Dimple, and thank you, Sanjay and Mitesh, for your time as well.
Thank you. Thank you for those key takeaways.
Thanks so much.
Uh, Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.
So we will now end this session, which has undoubtedly been very engaging and very perspective indeed. And I'm sure our participants would have got some really rewarding insights today. I thank the panelists for sharing their knowledge and experience with us. Once again, I would like to request our audience to fill in the feedback form. You can find the feedback link at the bottom of your screens. Please click on the link and provide your feedback, as it is very important to us. I also thank the audience for being patient throughout and asking all those questions during this ET Unwired session on collaboration series, Future Ready Enterprises in the Digital First World, powered by Tata Communications and Microsoft. Please join us for more such webinars. This is Dimple Bajwa signing off. Stay safe and healthy. Thank you, everyone.